Are you a chiropractor with a struggling practice, having a hard time finding and keeping patients? Is your staff falling short of expectations? I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer, and DC Trainings has the answers that you need. So tune in now and find out how. Hello, everybody. Welcome to DC Trainings. I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer, and today's topic is one that I am sure many of you have thought about or been thinking about. I know because I get questions all the time about this very topic that we're going to talk about today on our DC Trainings podcast/webinar, and that is, how do I hire an associate doctor? And I get this question so often that I thought, well, today this is perfect, because as I'm getting these questions, I've had feedback from some of you who've already gone through the process of hiring a doctor, and you've shared with me how successful that was in terms of bringing on a new doctor and having them join your team. So it's a hot topic. I'm really excited to dive into it, and let's go for it with our topic today. So the first thing I'm going to do is share my screen, and also just want to invite everybody, if you have any questions at any time, just let me know. I want to make sure this has an open participation format, or certainly don't want to let you leave the webinar with any questions unanswered. So just let me know. And just to share a little bit about my practice, I have an associate doctor that works with me full time, and together we see all of the patients together. He adjusts patients while I'm here, when I'm not here, when he's not here, I adjust patients. So we really share the patients together. That's one form of hiring a doctor. And then there's another form that I'm going to share with you as we get into more detail today with our call. And that's a different type of associate doctor to join your practice. We're going to cover both of those. So as you can see on your screen, we are already in week 6 of module 1. So we're moving right along. This topic is hiring a DC. And on this topic, what I want to share with you is really two things. Number one, for those of you who are in solo practice, how would it be if you could see twice as many patients, but not work twice as hard? And I think, obviously that's a stated question that should be attractive for you. At the same time, as another question, given your current volume of patients, we could set it up to where you're going to take more time off. We could set it up to where you're going to be collecting more income. So these are all possibilities when we talk about hiring a DC. Now, for me, what I love about this topic is it gives us the opportunity to serve more people. And I think, at the core of our intention as a doctor of chiropractic is we love to help people, and we want to help as many people as we can. Well, physically, there's only so many people we can help. But when we have another doctor joining our practice, and with your training with DC Trainings, they're joining a practice that's successful, that's running smoothly, that is operating efficiently, then our capacity to serve more people and bring chiropractic to more people in the world suddenly is exponentially higher. So that's really what excites me about this topic. So as you can see on the screen, we're talking about hiring a DC. Now, I want to remind you, just as a sidebar, our next seminar is coming up this month on March 23rd. So we're just a few weeks out. I'm looking forward to that seminar. It's going to be a virtual seminar, again, March 23rd, and we'll be hosting that virtually for you, so you can attend remotely from the comfort of your office. But please do us a favor and RSVP on the website so we know when to mail your materials out. We know who's going to be attending, and we can get everything organized on our end to make sure you have the best experience possible. The topic of that next seminar, which kicks off the module, will be new patient. And that's really that, there's that classic saying about you only get one chance to make a first impression. So make it a good one, right? And that seminar really is a hub in terms of launching your new patient into your style of practice, your philosophy for chiropractic, and potentially a lifetime or a lifelong experience with benefiting from chiropractic care. So really a hot topic seminar coming up on that date on March 23rd. Be sure to RSVP, and we will share all that information with you. All right, so let's dive into hiring a DC. Now, in your binder, and let me just hold this up for you quickly, because in your binder, which you all have your binders, you have the materials in here, and all these materials are laid out in an organized way so you can just follow through step by step. And I'm going to go through these materials in my binder at the same time, but you'll be able to see where I'm referencing this from as I go through the slides as well. So be sure to have your binder handy with all your materials. And so let's kick this off. So it says on the screen, hiring a DC outline. And in this topic, we want to choose your new doctor, your new DC, from an abundance of available doctors. And this is really going back to where we started this module, in the sense that when you hire a CA, I don't want you to, have 3 or 4 people applying for one position and then just sort of choose the best one. I want to make sure that you're choosing from an abundance of people so that you're really choosing the diamond in the rough. That's really important. We want to make sure you're choosing the best of the best. You're not narrowing it down to, well, we'll just choose the best one. You're saying to yourself, this is the person. I hope they join our team, and I want to make sure that we give them everything they need to express their innate talents to help our practice grow. So that's why I say on that last slide, choose your doctor from an abundance of available doctors. Don't just interview 1 or 2 doctors and then say, okay, well, I think I'll hire this one. Interview a bunch so you really get a good overview of who's going to be the best fit for your practice, not only, again, for your style of practice, but for the long term, so you get the best fit. So the hiring a DC outline, which again is in your binder, in your materials, is the best way to follow along as we go through the sequence in your binder. Okay, so let's jump to this next slide, because in excuse me, in this slide, we're talking about the different scenarios that I mentioned. The first one, obviously, as a reason for hiring another doctor, is to care for more patients, right? You want to care for more patients. You want to be able to serve more people and maybe not work harder, but work smarter. You want to increase your revenue, right? Maybe you want to collect more. You want to have a practice that's growing and generating more income. Maybe you want to share the workload. I mean, I work hard. Yesterday I adjusted a lot of patients. It was well over 150 patients yesterday. And again, not to share my numbers to impose value on your style of practice or how many patients you're taking care of. I just know I love helping people and I take care of a lot of people. So yesterday was a busy day. There's a limit in terms of how many people I can even take care of in a day. And so I like to share the workload with my associate. So when I'm not here, he can step in, or together we can serve twice as many people. And I mentioned that with regards to the last bullet point here about a dependable backup. I've been able to enjoy working really hard like I do, but I also condense it into a 4-day work week. And by doing that, my associate doctor works on Fridays. I don't work on Fridays. So today's Thursday. Tomorrow, he'll be here at the office adjusting all the patients, and I'll have the day off. And that gives us that ability to have a good backup when we're not here. Likewise, if he wants to take a vacation, I can adjust all the patients. If I want to take a vacation, he can adjust all the patients. So it really gives you this good backup scenario where you're able to continuously take care of your patients. Even when you're gone, your patients are still being taken care of. And I know the scenario that happens, and I'm going to share this with you from experience, but it's been a long time since I've actually experienced this, because I have in place what I'm sharing with you. So the typical doctor, when they take a vacation, they leave the practice. Maybe they go to some tropical paradise for a week. While they're gone, though, their patients don't get adjusted. They're not coming in. They're not making any payments, which means that the income of the practice goes down while the doctor's on vacation. Not only is the income of the practice going down, but there's the added expense of paying for the vacation that the doctor's on. So the expenses went up, the income went down. Not a good business model. Not only that, but the practice income went down, but worst of all, those patients that were getting adjusted aren't getting adjusted anymore. Now, I know what you might say. You might say, well, no, that's okay because I hired a relief doctor to come in and cover for me while I was gone. I understand. And I know how that works too, because what'll typically happen with a relief doctor is the doctor will come in and adjust your patients for you while you're gone. But during the course of taking care of your patients, the patients go, oh, this doctor's not as good as my regular doctor. I don't think I like the adjustments as much, or maybe they're just not quite as good, or they're not quite the same. And so I think I'll just wait until the doctor gets back and then I'll come in for my adjustments, right? So inevitably, when you have a relief doctor that just comes in on sort of a one-time basis, the first couple of days that the doctor's there, maybe the numbers are okay, but the longer the doctor is there, the more the numbers dip and they go down. And that's a problem because while you're on vacation and your expenses went up, then the patients are being seen less and less and less, and the income is going down. So again, we don't want this to happen in the case of, in either case, when you're not there, right? So let's jump back over to our slide here and continue on, because in this scenario, you can obviously see it's better to have an associate doctor working with you so that none of these situations come up when you're there or when you're not there, either way, okay? So let's keep going because there's two ways to incorporate an associate doctor into your practice. The first way is with an employee DC. The second way is with an associate DC. Now, there's benefits to both, but both are completely different scenarios. So you can have one or the other, or you can have both. But I want to lay out some of the features and the benefits and the potential pitfalls of each one of these scenarios. So let's take the first one, the employee DC. In this scenario, all of the patients belong to the primary DC, the PDC, which is the primary doctor of chiropractic, or in most cases, the practice owner. So all the patients belong to the main doctor. In addition to that, well, the benefits of that are there's complete coverage for the practice, right? So whether I'm in my office or I'm not in my office, all of the patients are being seen by this associate doctor. So there's complete coverage. I could cut out early in the afternoon if I needed to and go surfing, and the doctor would just step into my place and start adjusting everybody, and nobody misses a beat in the whole office. So there's complete coverage, and that's one of the great benefits of this scenario. The drawbacks on this, aside from finding a doctor who can match your technique, that's a big one. We're going to come back to that in a minute, but it's very important that any associate doctor who's going to be an employee DC can completely match your style of practice, not just even your adjusting style, but also your bedside manner, how you develop rapport with your patients. All of that needs to be matched. So that's very an important sidebar. The drawback, though, as I said, requires a full schedule of duties, because by having this doctor in place full time in your office, that means that they're going to need to be busy full time. Now, doctors, for those of you who enjoy adjusting your patients, that may mean that there's one of two areas that you'll need to address. One, you need to have so many patients that not only are you adjusting the patients, but your associate doctor is also adjusting patients in a full-time capacity. Or you would want to add some other duties in the office, some other job duties for that doctor to be busy while you're adjusting patients. Okay, so let me give you some examples of what areas can provide a full-time schedule for this doctor while the primary doctor of chiropractic is also adjusting. Okay, so let's use an example. Let's say for new patients. Okay, for new patients, when they come in my office, my CAs do the consultation. Then I do the first part of the spinal palpation and I document my notes. And then I have my associate doctor come in for the second part of the initial examination and do another series of tests. And it's a great way for that doctor to get to meet the new patients. They can build rapport. They can also develop, just that rapport. So they're comfortable knowing that either of us is going to be doing their adjustments, and there's a consistency across the board. Also, this doctor could be taking x-rays. They can be marking x-rays. They can be creating the parts of the patient file that require a doctor's input. What do I mean by that? indicating the diagnosis, right? A CA cannot do a diagnosis. It has to be done by the doctor. So that's another example where the doctor can sort of complete those patient profiles by marking the x-rays, inputting the x-rays, taking the x-rays, initiating the diagnosis, and setting up that part of the patient file. Very helpful, very advantageous, and very important, right? So let's continue on, because those are some of the benefits and the drawbacks of having an employee DC. Now let's switch over to the associate DC. So this is different. This is a doctor who is, well, I'll just show you. They're going to be maintaining their own patients. So they're not going to be seeing your patients, primary doctors and practice owners. They're going to have their own patients, right? So they have their own patient files. They have separate information. They probably will take care of those patients in a either slightly or significantly different way, right? Because they're orchestrating all of the care of their own patients. So if they use a different technique, that's great. If they use a different set of recommendations, that's great. They're maintaining their own patients and their own patient care. They also can, by doing this, they can be paying either a percentage of their income to the practice, or they can be paying a flat rate of rent. Either way, one of the other benefits is this is an increased revenue for the practice, right? So there's increased income, there's added benefits in those areas too. And as another benefit, this doctor who is running they have their own practice, their own patients, their own charges, their own billing, all of that at the same time to complement your practice doctors as the practice owner. They could be a dependable backup for you. Now, I want to give you some of the speed bumps so you don't run into these when you set this up. Number one, they have to know that when they're doing dependable backup for you, they need to match your style of practice, right? Because, of course, probably goes without saying, but you don't want this doctor to be, I'll say, quote unquote, stealing your patients. You don't want your patients to be switching over to that doctor and leaving you because they like that doctor's style of practice better than yours. Or vice versa, you don't want your patients to say, hey, I don't want to see that doctor again because they did the adjustments differently and I didn't like that. So there has to be consistency in terms of the type of care they're providing. It has to be very consistent, like almost perfectly matching your technique. So it may turn out that you have an associate doctor that's seeing their own patients with a different style of practice, but they know that when they see your patients, they're going to match your style of practice. Now, there's great ways that you can set this up. You might set this up to where, on an annual basis and I'm just using arbitrary numbers, so don't quote me on the numbers, but as in exchange for a reduced rental amount or a reduced percentage of income collected amount, in exchange for that, this doctor would cover your practice and your patients for 4 weeks a year. Okay, that could be a great example. And by doing it in that way, this associate doctor knows that they're going to be taking care of your patients exactly as you would when you're gone. And they're going to have a reduced rate of rent or an offset overhead amount because they're going to be covering your practice on those days. And so then they get a reduction in the overhead that they're paying. And so it's a win-win scenario, right? You've got the coverage. You don't have the full-time expense of an employee DC, but you do have the coverage and it's reliable, and you have the income of that doctor paying rent. So there's lots of benefits to these two scenarios, but as I said in the beginning, they're very different. So you have to decide which one is going to be the best one. Let me give you a couple of drawbacks on the associate doctor, because the first is that here's a doctor who's seeing their own patients. So technically, a large part of their practice they are managing, right? And that may mean that if they're not happy with the environment or the relationship, they can just leave. I mean, any doctor or any employee can always leave. That's fine. But if they get the wrong impression that they could just go and run a practice like yours easily because they're seeing it done, and they'll just take all their patients and go start their own practice somewhere else, then obviously that could be a hardship for you doctors as the practice owner. The other drawback, as I mentioned, and I'll elaborate it again, is that the techniques and scripts may differ. So how they take care of patients can be very different. So it's really important that if you do have a doctor who's covering your patients and they're an associate with their own practice, that they understand how critical it is that when they're taking care of your patients, they do it your way. When they take care of their patients, they can do it however they see fit. Okay. So just again, on those drawbacks, I'm going to give you some tips so that you can prevent these drawbacks, but just be aware that they exist. All right. So let's go through some job duties and some of the materials in the binder so you can understand how this fits in. So this is the DC job duties. And again, this is in your binder. And this is relating to the full-time schedule of an employee DC. Okay. And this is just a sample schedule. You can fluctuate this, but this is a schedule where and this is, again, this is in your binder. You've got this printed out. You can look at this and download it right off the website. But this is a sample schedule whereby a doctor is working full-time in the practice. Now, what you'll notice when you get into this document in more detail is that this doctor is spending most of their working hours during patient times, not production times. Now, I'll just use my associate as an example. He has a long lunch. He likes to go surfing on his lunch. So he's actually off work for 3 hours in the middle of the day for his lunch break. So he comes in the morning. We see patients together in the morning. He takes a long lunch break. He goes surfing. He comes back. He tells me how good it was. I get jealous. I'm kidding. And then he comes back, and then we work together for the afternoon seeing patients. So that type of schedule, he really likes that because he likes the long lunch break. You might have a different schedule, and that's okay. The point of my emphasis around this is that you want your associate doctor in this scenario to focus the time that they're working around patient care times. They're not as busy during production times, depending on what their duties are, but given the examples that I gave you, there's not a lot for them to do during production time unless they're, billing insurance or doing patient recalls. But those typically aren't the doctor's responsibilities. Those are the CA's responsibilities. So I like to focus the time spent on things that actually require a doctor's abilities and skills, not so much time on other areas where it doesn't require a doctor's expertise and skills. Now, I said almost, or mostly. That's because there are certain things that my associate doctor does when we're not as busy with patients that are directly related to, back office stuff. He changes our insurance profiles sometimes. He works on in the insurance department to some degree. So there is some stuff in the back end that he works on, or in the back office that he works on, that's not directly related to patient care, but the majority of his schedule is centered around patient care. So let's continue on. Here, you'll see the DC employment agreement. And this is a document which is in your materials. I'm just going to hold up this one. We didn't actually print it out and include it in the materials for your binder, but it is available on the website. So you can actually print this out and have it for your office. It is watermarked with sample across the pages because this is a legally binding employment agreement. So you want to make sure, whichever state you're in, if you use this document, that you are using one that is approved in your state with your labor laws. And that's why I put sample on this as a watermark, because I want to make sure that that you actually get this approved properly. But for the state of California, this is what I use, and it is all, I've had my attorney review it. It's all compliant with the labor laws. Okay, so that's, and I'm sorry, there's one more part of this, in that this is an associate or an employment agreement for a doctor of chiropractic, and it does have parts in it where it covers, this section is relating to an associate doctor versus this section is relating to an employee doctor, and it separates those out. As a key point, one example is around salary. So there's some distinction points in this document where you would then take out or line item out a part that doesn't apply given the status of your associate doctor. So I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, so let's continue on. Now, this is how you maintain long-term employment. Whichever scenario you've chosen, whether it's an employee DC or whether it's an associate DC, this is how you maintain long-term employment. Because as you remember, one of those topics that I went through was that you want to avoid a possible flight risk. You want to create this home environment where your associate doctor feels secure and stable and able to work and do their best, and at the same time know that tomorrow they might be fired know that tomorrow they won't be fired. That you want this to be a stable employment environment for a long-term fit, and these are the ways that you guarantee that that's the case. Okay. Now, actually, sorry, I just want to give you one more example because many of you have been following along with DC trainings for a long time now. And I had an associate doctor who just recently left, and it was because he moved. He didn't actually move, but it was a long commute for him, and his kids got older. And so one was going to one school, another was going to another school. And so it got impossible. It got to where it was impossible between him and his wife to shuttle the kids to two different schools while he was working fairly far from his home. So he left. But the point of that story, without the tangent, is that he and I worked together for 17 years. So really, you can create a great long-term fit with your associate doctor. My current associate doctor has been working with me for 1.5 years, and we're off to a great start, I feel. So here's how you maintain a good long-term fit with your associate doctors. Trained CAs perform the key patient encounters. Okay, what does that mean? That means there's certain things in the office that as business owners, we know are the most challenging, right? And those challenging areas in a very successful DC trainings, well-oiled machine practice, those areas don't seem like a big deal. And yet they are, but they may not be as obvious when your practice is running really smoothly. So as an associate doctor coming into a practice like that, they think, oh, this thing's running like a well-oiled machine. I could do this on my own. It'd be easy. I'm just going to go and start my own practice and do it. Well, they miss the point that there's a lot of stuff that's very difficult and challenging when you're running a fully staffed, operating, and successful practice. So to not give this associate doctor the wrong impression that it's just really easy and anyone can do it, we make sure that there's certain key areas that they don't operate in, and we train our CAs to do those functions, which ultimately they do a better job anyways, right? I'm a practice owner, and so I train my CAs to do these things, knowing that they're going to do probably a better job than me, or at least as good as, and it's much easier for me to run the practice at the level I want to when they're doing these things, okay? So what are those things? Well, the first one is new patients. If you train your CAs to do the new patient consultation and intake, and part of the exam, then your associate doctor doesn't have to do those things, and they don't get the false impression that they could just do it easily, right? How about report of findings? How about financial arrangements? These are the key encounters that you train your CAs to do. And again, I'll just say again, they'll probably do a better job anyways. And by not having your associate doctor operate in those areas, they won't get the false impression that it's easy and anybody can do it, okay? So these are the things that we want to make sure we don't have our associate doctor do. There's another thing a little deeper in this, but the first one is new patients. With new patients, one of the things that I encourage you not to have your associate doctor do, although many doctors do this and it's a pitfall, is don't have your associate doctor involved in marketing. Marketing is how we bring in new patients. It doesn't have to be done by a doctor. So I would not assign this responsibility to your associate doctor to avoid giving them the wrong impression that it's just easy and anybody can run a practice like this. So these are, again, how you maintain long-term employment. Now, quite honestly, I don't enjoy marketing, right? My practice has a lot of marketing going on all the time. I don't really enjoy that part of it. So it's kind of a breath of fresh air for me, and it's a breath of fresh air for my associate doctor if we both know we're not going to be involved in that. That's something that someone else is going to handle. Great. I like that. So knowing that, you can set that up from the beginning, and your team will appreciate you more for it, including your associate doctor. Okay. So that's a really important point. Now, here's some of the benefits though, and this is the benefits that go along with providing long-term employment. provide insurance. So my associate doctor knows that I pay for his malpractice insurance, his health insurance, I pay for his relicensing, his continuing education. That's all paid for. It's taken care of as part of his employment here. So those are some of the perks and benefits that you'll find add to the value of working in your office. And in the long run, I know these are extra expenses, but you'll make it up exponentially in income with a well-trained, long-term, great fit associate doctor. Okay, so just know that you'll make it up in the long run. So back to why hire a doctor of chiropractic? Well, now you know, right? You've seen it. Hiring a DC can provide a platform for higher profitability and the ability to serve more patients. Very important, right? This is a great stepping stone to grow your practice and create something that's more set up on autopilot, like any business should be, and it'll obviously serve you better in the long run. I want to just give a shout out to Dr. Brian Torchin, his company with HCRC Staffing. They have been great at helping with finding potential associate doctors. So I just wanted to put his number up there. I don't get any kickbacks from him or anything, but if you're interested in reaching out to him, he can certainly help you. And from there, next week, we'll get into job duties. Now, I'm going to jump over to the website in a minute, but the reason why we waited until after hiring a DC to go into job duties is, as you'll see, for job duties, we're covering the whole gamut of the responsibilities that your team will have, whether they're the CA or an associate doctor, to make your practice run smoothly and on autopilot. So that's why I didn't lump those two together. This hiring sequence is a lot like the CA hiring sequence, where I delineate each step of the way to take you from point A to point B and find yourself a new doctor. So just follow it step by step. Okay. I want to read these first two lines because it kind of sets the stage for the rest of the document. And that is, you want to emphasize your hiring efforts in two main profiles. Number one, all active DCs who are struggling to maintain a successful practice. Now, part of the hiring process that I've shown you through this module in team development is, what goes without saying here is these doctors that you see, that you find that are struggling, they should be within a 30-minute commute of your practice within rush hour traffic, or in rush hour traffic, whatever that means in your area. I know it's different for all of us. Just make sure, excuse me, that you find the doctors that are close enough to you to where they wouldn't mind the reasonable commute to and from your office on a day-to-day basis. The second is all DCs advertising ability to provide relief coverage. Now, in this case, once again, when you look on the internet and you find doctors that are available for relief coverage, they might be coming from 2 or 3 hours away. We're not looking for those doctors. We're looking for the doctors that are, once again, within a reasonable 30-minute commute of your office. Those are the doctors that we're looking for. So then it goes from there into the timeline, and it continues on through all the details. So that's on there for you. You can use that. And again, just follow it to the T, step by step. Here is the DC employment agreement. And this is a multi-page document. In fact, it's 6 pages long. I'm just scrolling through to give you an idea. There's a lot of detail in this. And the reason why that's important is because it's a legally binding contract. So it does cover all of the details that you need to have a great working relationship with your employees. Now, as I'm pausing on this, there are some important things to say. Number one, going into any business relationship, as having an employee is, the most important part of any business relationship is the exit strategy, right? So if things go sour, which we hope they never will, what do we do if we're parting ways? Well, that's what this has in there for you. It has all that, the legal jargon and the details. And then, as I said earlier, it also goes into the differences between an employee's compensation versus a compensation as an associate DC. So it has the 2 separate sections here. And of course, you would choose the one that fits your scenario. So that's there for you. Now, I didn't mail it out to you in the packets, but it's available for download at dctrainings.com. And so that's there for you. The next is your DC resource list. And this is the list that you want to keep on hand as a turnkey option for if you ever end up in a pinch and you need to hire another doctor quickly. Have this ready. And in the meantime, if you're not in a pinch and you're looking at thinking about adding a doctor, then you can just take a look at this and use some of these resources and keep them on a list and handy. My vision and goal, well, actually, I'm going to save that because we're going to finish up with that in just a minute. But my vision and goal, I will share with you in just a moment. So that's on there, the DC resource list. There's also a nice little sample ad in here. So if you are going to post an ad like in ChiroCom or at one of the chiropractic websites, those are both great options. Here's a really nice sample of what type of ad to place, and this will definitely get a good response. I've done it myself, and it works very well. Okay, so that's the DC resource list. In addition to that, we have, just for closure, if you've interviewed any doctors and they were maybe excited to work with you, or you were considering them and then you ended up choosing somebody else, just for closure, send them an applicant decline letter. Let them know that you filled the position and that they're no longer being considered for the position. So just a nice way to have closure and maintain good relationships. And then lastly, as I went through on the slide, here's the DC job duties with a sample employment schedule. There's also lists of general duties, and they're broken up into sections. The first section is patient care. Very important to have details around this, right? What does patient care mean? What is required? What is not required? What is actually not allowed, right? Having those details in there gives a clear path for your associate doctor to follow and to perform well. It also talks about initial examination. So as I mentioned, I wouldn't have this associate doctor doing consultations with new patients because that builds confidence or builds sometimes false confidence, and they might be a flight risk. But doing part of the initial examination is a great asset for your practice. I like it because all of my new patients on their very first visit meet me and my associate doctor. Well, I shouldn't say on their first visit. They meet me on either their first or second visit. So, for example, if I was on vacation for their first visit, they'll meet the associate doctor. But when they come back for their report of findings, then they're going to meet me. So they get to meet us both. And that way they have this exposure and this relationship, and they feel comfortable receiving chiropractic care from both of us. And it starts right at day one. Okay. So that's the initial examinations. We also want to incorporate the doctor into progress exams. So re-exams, progress x-rays. We both are performing those in those areas of the practice to give the patients familiarity with both of us, and for cross-training so that when I'm gone, nothing changes in the practice. The patient care stays continuous. It stays consistent, whether I'm here or not, as should be the case with any successful business, right? I'm showing you how to run your practice as a business. And that way, businesses, when they're viable, keep running and running and running. Think about BJ Palmer, who started the Palmer Davenport Clinic. He looked at that as a business. That's why they call D.D. Palmer the founder of chiropractic. They call B.J. Palmer the developer of chiropractic. He looked at it as a business. The only reason why we're all still here today practicing as chiropractors all around the world is because B.J. looked at it as a business. And if you've ever read the history books, part of what there was the butting of heads where you can read about it, where B.J. and D.D. were not getting along very well. And it was because of the difference in the vision they had for chiropractic. D.D. wanted to keep it a focused, family level type of practice where moms and pops could all utilize and practice chiropractic on themselves and their children and their neighbors and anybody. B.J. wanted it to be elevated to the level of a doctorate program with colleges and a worldwide profession as a business, which is where we are today. And it's my thoughts that if we had stuck with D.D.'s original plan for the practice of chiropractic, I don't know if it would have stood the test of time, because it would have been up against the pharmaceutical industry from day one. It was, and I don't think it would have stood the time because of the pressure that was placed on it from external forces in the pharmaceutical profession. So anyways, that was a little sidebar of philosophy, but just know that having your practice run like a business ensures longevity, the best patient outcomes, and as the practice owner, it gives you freedom to where you can have time off or you can work harder, but you always can work smarter and serve more patients. Okay, so back to here though, miscellaneous, it goes into the most miscellaneous. Now there's a line on here I want to emphasize. It says, under miscellaneous, it says perform any and all additional duties or items deemed necessary by the PDC and or the staff. I've had a couple of offices now where I've had lengthy conversations where the PDC is telling me my associate won't do X or they don't want to do Y. And it's because when they were hired, they weren't told that that would be part of their job duties. Okay. Now I know we all get comfortable in our, standard operating procedures and the day-to-day routines. That's fine. But as we all know in a chiropractic practice, things can change. And when they change, we all need to change with the tide, right? So it's important to have this line in your DC job duties so that if you do spring something new onto the team that needs to happen as these things do come up, that they can't say, I wasn't trained on that in the beginning. I wasn't told I was going to have to do that. So no, I'm not doing it. Well, actually, in the employment agreement that we set up for you in the beginning, it says right here that if there's any additional things that come up, that's going to be part of your job duties. And now it is. Okay. Now, I do recommend that on this document, you all sign it. I didn't put a signature line on here, but in my office, my associate doctor signed this. I signed it. It has a date. And so it's part of that permanent employment file. Okay. And then down here, lastly, there's required materials for ongoing use. So I've made it pretty easy for you as far as the training schedule, that these are the specific scripts from DC trainings that the associate doctor should learn and incorporate and use on a day-to-day basis in your practice. So it makes it really easy to plug this in. And those are all available for you at dctrainings.com. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. It's been a great call with you today. As always, any questions you have, you can email them to us at dctrainings@gmail.com. Or you can join us on our weekly webinar. And I will look forward to talking to you very soon. And stay in the game, keep pulling forward, enjoy yourself, because chiropractic is so much fun. And at the same time, we're changing the world one spine at a time. I'll look forward to talking to you next week. Thank you again.
If you would like to become a member of DC Trainings, be sure to head on over to dctrainings.com to get started today.